It was actually quite good, and then it just kept going and kept going and kept going until it was no longer good, and you just wanted it to end. And this isn't a spoiler because you realize that it doesn't really end, and there's going to be a part 2. They really stretched this out to the max, and without any good reason except for the fact that 2 movies means more money. This whole story could have been concluded in one epic movie, and I wouldn't have minded if it was 2.5 hours long, because that's how long the Broadway probably is. I haven't seen the musical, so I don't know anything about this story. I am only familiar with The Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz, The Muppets Wizard of Oz, and the James Franco masterpiece Oz the Great and Powerful. So I'm not sure how much this first part actually adapted from the musical. And I wouldn't be surprised if they covered just a third of the musical, because a lot of scenes felt so needlessly dragged out. The musical sequences in particular felt long and arduous, and they felt long because a lot of them weren't very memorable. Look, not all the songs are bad. The ones from the musical, they're great, I was into them. But nonetheless, there were quite a few numbers. So many, in fact, I am pretty sure that some of these songs aren't even from the musical. So obviously this is adapted from the hit Broadway musical Wicked, which is actually adapted from a novel by Gregory Maguire. So this is set years before Dorothy's timeline, going back to the time the Wicked Witch of the West was alive. And she wasn't wicked at all. In fact, she was friends with Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, in this academy called Shiz University. So the movie is about the Wicked Witch of the West, whose name is Elphaba, and she has a paraplegic sister called Nessa Rose. Her father despises her because she believes Elphaba to be a curse for her green skin color. So I was being introduced to all of this backstory and information about the world of Oz and the creatures that inhabit it. And I have to say I was incredibly fascinated by it. And it became clear that Wicked isn't the story that I thought it was based on that famous Broadway poster and these less than underwhelming trailers. It's actually about discrimination, it's about bullying, it's about being suppressed and unable to express yourself for who you are. If you are different, you are treated like you are less than everyone else. I thought they conveyed these themes quite well. They handled it with a blend of maturity that didn't feel preachy. Perhaps picking on one person from adults was a stretch, but to be honest, it kind of makes sense in this world because the people of Oz are just stupid. They honestly deserve what they get. They're pretty much asking for trouble. What I liked about this is that they reversed the roles and blurred the lines between good and evil. Humanizing an iconic villain as a sympathetic character is a fascinating approach. And Wicked was probably the first story to start this trend of sympathetic villains. All these new Disney movies like Maleficent and Cruella are clearly trying to live off the fame of Wicked. So you're pretty much feeling sorry for Elphaba, and because you know how her arc concludes, Wicked is a very tragic story that says a lot about the people of Oz, and reflects them as the villains rather than Elphaba. They also portray Glinda as this selfish and comical rich uptight girl, which was an interesting approach for a character that is supposedly pure of heart. She's not the villain, but she isn't a nice character at first, at least for the first half, and she does change by the end as expected. But I like that they provided this arc for her because it actually improved her character and gave her some personality. There's a great and rather horrifying quote that I think still remains relevant today, and it's said by the wizard himself. The best way to bring folks together is to give them a really good enemy. The fact that this is still relevant today shows you how messed up humans are. I mean, this type of thinking and manipulation, and for people to believe it. I mean, Wicked was addressing some really intelligent themes. The plot about animals being taken away and being discriminated, I would have liked it to be conveyed in a more intense way, but then that whimsical factor that makes Oz so unique would be taken away. But I guess that's what I really liked about Return to Oz. It's a dark and mature version that many Oz fans hated. The character I felt most sorry for was the goat. Not that goat, the professor of Shiz University. One of the last animal professors who was incredibly knowledgeable but is clearly disrespected by humans. For me, this was the most engaging part of the film. I would have liked them to explore it even more. Halfway through the movie, I was really enjoying it, but eventually it reached a point where it didn't stop. The pacing didn't feel right, the musical numbers felt unnecessary at times. The focus of the story was drifting or delaying. Even the last half an hour, which was very eventful, but the singing was too much. And I know what you're gonna say, it's a musical, what do you expect? Well, it just felt like they weren't getting on with the story. And the fact that this is a part 1 justifies my criticism of the length. I did not need this to be so long. It did not need to be this long, so much could have been cut out. My enjoyment of the movie was diminishing minute by minute. This doesn't need to be 2 parts. Even the people who love this would say, it's good but it was very long. To me, that's not a good sign about the movie. Fiyero or Fyro Tigala, he's as stupid as his name, definitely my least favourite character in the film. Offered nothing, zero charisma, just very paint by numbers. It's like they just fished him out of a factory of generic Disney princes and said, you'll do for this. The visual effects were not great. Before the film played, they were showing all the trailers, and one of them was Snow White, which features those terrifying CG dwarves. The CGI in Wicked was nowhere near on that level of atrocity, but the way these animals looked just didn't convince me they were real. It just didn't look like they were in the same room as the human characters. And they were far too reliant on the digital effects. It was starting to blemish the production design, which was real and practical. But the CGI was overstuffing these qualities, which made the world look kind of fake. You have to remember that the original Wizard of Oz from 1939 used extensive practical effects, because that's all they had. You could tell that the Lion was a human playing dress up in a costume, but you were convinced based on the way all the creatures looked in the world that this is how the lion would look. Its use of large painted backgrounds, which was predominantly used in studio movies in this era, proved to be more realistic than a blue screen. And to this day, that film still remains as magical and impressive as it was in 1939. And it's all because the effects were practical. On the other hand, the production design and costume design in Wicked were impressive. And I wouldn't be surprised if they got Oscar nominations for those categories. I wish I loved this movie, but it just kept dragging and dragging until I gave up and said, this is too much now. You're deliberately delaying for a part 2. Yeah, 5 out of 10, it's good until it stops being good, if that makes sense.